21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
First of all, how did you come up with the idea for your own technical content marketing firm?
It came a bit organically as far as these things go. So I have always liked writing for fun, and I was a software engineer, so I would write about being a software engineer. And then as I moved into management, I'd write about what it's like to manage teams of software engineers and other technical things. Anyway, I did it enough on my personal blog and other sites that eventually companies started reaching out to me saying, we would pay you a few $100s if you'd write some blog posts for us. So I did it a few times on and off when I had time, but I was still working full time. And then what happened was during COVID, the beginning of COVID, the company I was working for started to hit a rough patch, and they were going to shut down. It was a small startup. We just were not going to last long enough with the funding we had. And so as I saw the writing on the wall, I started to say okay, what do I want to do next? I'll just start doing some more writing. The companies were reaching out to me already. Figure I'll just start with them. I'll start talking to other people that might be similar and ask if they want me to write some things. And I'll just become a writer for a while and then figure out what my next job is, And within probably 3 months, as I transitioned out of the old job and did this full time, it became really clear that there was just a ton of unmet demand in this space, because what I'm doing is just only writing content aimed at software engineers, written by another software engineer. So it's super technical. It's got code samples. It's got real world experience, very unique offering in a way. And so companies just couldn't get enough of that. I kept raising my rates. I kept, I started to then hire other people to write things, and then I'd subcontract out work, and then I started to get an editor in place. And it was almost I don't want to say it was accidental, because I did think about it yeah, this could be a company, but honestly, it was not day one. I thought this is going to be a 17-person company in 2 years like it is today. So it's really just grown very quickly, and because largely market demand, right place, right time.
So because of the COVID, it was something between leap of faith and logic thinking.
Necessity. Yeah. I mean, necessity. It was a little bit of, so my wife has a great job. But she works at a hospital where she has to go in every day. I wanted something very flexible, and I thought freelance writing is a good flexible thing. I can do it at night, watch the kid during the day when daycare is closed or whatever. There was a lot of advantages there too. So it was partly necessity and wanting to have something to do to keep my feet moving. But also I figured, by writing a bunch of stuff, I'm putting my name out there on the internet, and someone will see that and they'll eventually offer me a job, or they'll, want to pay me to do more writing. I don't know. It's just a good thing to have more of your name out there on the internet.
And is your wife okay with your, I don't know, my name is on internet, so we will see?
Oh gosh, she's not the same style as me. She's a much more private and normal person, and I guess I'm the attention grabber. But it's she definitely was very supportive. I mean, I think starting a company is a big challenge and a big leap of faith that you can figure things out. Even though I was making some money, it was much less than I made as a software engineer for the first 2 years, really. And she had to be she provided healthcare through her job. And so in the US here, we don't get just free healthcare. So it's a really big deal if you've got a family. But she was also bringing in a lot of income. In the first year, especially, I was bringing much, much less. And so we had to, work through that. And that it was very much a mutual decision. I told her the whole time, if you decide look, you need to go get a job and, grow up, then I'll go get a job and grow up, and that's fine. But, again, because it took off and started to do well pretty quickly, she was very okay with me taking a little bit of risk there.
What does it mean, grow up? I suppose not in a matter of emotional maturity, but because entrepreneurship is pretty emotional, mature business.
It is. It is, but it's also, it's a bit selfish. I mean, I'm going to get a little philosophical here, but going out and saying, oh, I'm going to ignore a $150,000 a year job, a great software engineering leadership job I could go get tomorrow, and going and making almost no money to do your own thing because you think you're so smart, you're going to figure out how to make even more in the future. That's a very egotistical thing to do and selfish thing to do, especially when you have a family. I'm sorry, I'm talking personally. When I have a family to help support and a lifestyle that we want to maintain. So anyway, all of it, like, I had to put my contributions to long-term savings on hold. I had to put my contributions to the rent on hold. A lot of big things that, could have, if it hadn't gone well, would have put us back a few years for retirement. Now, that said, again, like I could have gone and gotten that job again later. So I was not thinking this is, the big switch. If I flip it, it's, never recoverable. But still, it's a selfish act.
In your industry, what's the window of opportunity for that kind of, let's say, new startup? So I suppose if you are waiting for too long, for 2 years, 3 years, your market will not recognize you anymore for full-time job, or what's the window of opportunity? Or you have chance after 3 years and 5 years?
I don't know. That's a good question. I would be curious to know if anyone has like encountered the window closing on them. I think it's more likely that what would have happened is right now, if I had to go get a job, I'm pretty out of practice with writing code. I've been managing full time for the last couple of years, basically, since we started to hire people. And so I now would probably have to go get a job as more of a manager and pretty hands off with technical things. So it would probably just shift my opportunities rather than close the window on opportunities. It's like, I think maybe that's something I look at opportunities anyway, as more of like, they're always shifting. And what's cool is once you start to throw in this weird mix of experience, like I've had now, like I've been a full-time writer, I've been a software engineer, I've led a team of software engineers, I've grown a little company. Like now I have all these weird windows that could open up that aren't typical jobs. And so maybe a company hires me to do consulting for their business that's similar to what I did, or maybe a company hires me in like one of these weird hybrid developer / marketing roles that exist now. So there's all sorts of, I think this is one thing that people get too worried about, is like picking a career path and saying, I have to follow exactly what the path is. Like you can deviate quite a bit and go do like 2 career paths in a way if you're creative and you're willing to just say like, I'm just not going to follow all the rules. Maybe I'll follow most of them, but not quite all of them.
Are there any other unique challenges of running a business like yours?
I think the biggest things are people and emotions, managing my own emotional health and psychology. So as I moved from doing all the work myself to depending on a team to help me do the work and hiring that team and managing that team, everything got scary for a while. Like all of a sudden I was not writing this piece of content that we were going to turn around to a client and charge them a lot of money for. And I felt this almost like fear that, oh, what if they screw it up? It's going to look like I'm a failure, right? And that's a very common fear. And so initially, early on, especially when a single client would come back and say, this isn't what we wanted, it really affected me. Like I couldn't sleep at night sometimes when that happened. And it took a while. I mean, the first year was a lot of sleepless nights over like worrying about losing clients, worrying about like screwing something up, worrying about making a bad hire, having to fire somebody or something like that. Like all these things happened in the first year that I had never really encountered before. And managing, like keeping myself level and not like on these emotional swings all the time was extremely difficult. And so I don't know if this is helpful, but I did find a few coping mechanisms that helped me personally. And so for me, it was finding some peer groups. So I'm in a couple of different peer groups that are like groups of other entrepreneurs who we all struggle with this kind of emotional ups and downs. We talk about the difficulty of it. I found a coach, an executive coach who also helps me a lot. Coaching is funny. It's almost therapy, but also very forward facing. And so it ends up being a lot of like me talking about the fears and worries I have and him talking about like, okay, how do you overcome that? How do you start to like make a plan? Like, what do you do there? And it's really helpful, as well as having mentors who have been through this, who are 5 or 10 years ahead of me, that can look back and say, yeah, I remember what that's like. Like, you'll be fine. We all got through that. And it's not that uncommon to feel that way. So finding solutions like that. And besides that, like keeping up with your physical health, like, or my physical health, that's a huge one for me. But anything like trying to get sleep in order, like all that is really helpful. Again, it helps to have a supportive spouse and awesome kid to spend time with, but it's tough. I mean, I don't want to go back to that year one again, if I can help it.
Fingers crossed. Very often I ask a question about daily routines. So what does your day-to-day work look like? Work, sport, meditation, sleeping?
I wake up early, so 5:30, and I do some kind of workout. Either I mix in running or some kind of weights. I'm not a super athletic guy, but at least get 30 minutes of activity in every day. That's great. I kind of do like a protein shake for breakfast. Really like don't eat a ton in the morning, and then make a salad for lunch. My day to day is like I take the kid to school, and then I'm meetings all day until I pick him up, and then it's like I cram in a lunch in there, maybe some emails in the middle. That's basically it at this point. It's been really interesting going from a software developer who gets at least half of my time was heads down coding work to now as a CEO of a company that's growing and we're constantly hiring. All I do are phone calls all day or Zoom calls all day. And I don't dislike it. I think it's just something to think about. If you're, like I always tell people who are thinking about starting a business, I'm like, okay, if you really want to grow a business, you're eventually going to get to a point where all you do is communication with other people, whether it's external things like going on a podcast, or it's internal, like talking to your directors and trying to help them get through their issues, or it's big picture, like talking to the team about the vision, or it's going and hiring people or meeting with partners. Like that's all you do. And you get like a few hours here and there to go think and like try to make decisions. And then you just meet with people and dispel those decisions out. And that's the cycle. And so I don't dislike it, but it's interesting to learn about. It's just all a new thing to me.
Do you have a solid business model, or are you still in developing it?
Yeah, we're pretty solid. I mean, from the beginning, I went super niche down. I said, we're only going to write content for companies that want to reach software developers. We're going to have these three personas who are target people we want to talk to. And that has stayed pretty true since. We've moved slightly up market since day zero, where the early days we were working a lot more with early stage startups that were maybe 10 people, 20 people. And then now we've moved towards our typical client is like a Series B or greater company. So usually they have 100 or so employees or more. And now we have more clients that are bigger, Fortune 500 and publicly traded companies too. That's kind of a natural like cycle that happens though as a business matures, because those clients are stickier. They're a little easier to depend on. They are less price sensitive, but also it's easier for us to service them because we know they'll be around. Some of the small startups, they come in and out all the time, and they're fun. I love talking to those founders, but they're not easy to build a business off of.
And when you say we, what's your team? Mostly VA, or what's the organizational structure?
Yeah. So I pretty intentionally wanted to, from the beginning, hire people who were higher level strategic thinkers that could take on a lot of that work for me. So in other words, like I have two direct reports. I'm trying to get my third in. So I will have three directors under me, and then each of them will have their own teams of production and account management and salespeople. But where that's at, like the goal is I want to be able to set the big vision of where we're going and check in on the monthly financials and give all them the things they need, the budget and the whatever support they need to make things happen. But I want to stay out of their way and let them run their portion of the business. The reason I kind of think that way is like when I talk to entrepreneurs who are running, let's say a $10 million or $100 million company, that's the way they operate. They don't go in there and jump on every sales call. They can't go in there and tell like who to hire and who to fire on each individual team. They instead just sit back and try to coach and help and support and set the vision. And so I've been trying to like grow into that. Like I'm trying to learn to be that, which is really, it's a big switch, but that's like the way I think about it. Is like, you have to act like the leader you want to be if you want to be that leader. So I'm pretending to be that until I get there. So that's how it looks. We have about 17 full-time people, and then a couple hundred contractors. So those contractors, because of the nature of what we write, it's very technical. We need lots of technical experts who can just hop in and write 1 or 2 articles a month. So most of them are part-time. They're software engineers. They have a day job and they do this on nights and weekends as a way to make a little extra money and get their name out there. One of the things that's really cool about our business is we not only get to help clients create really great content, but the engineers who write the pieces get their names on it. So they get to share that with their future employers and say, look at this thing I wrote, look at this. So they're opening up new job opportunities for themselves as well. And we've now worked with, it's well over 250 writers in 54 countries to write content. And so it's like, I've made a way more impact than I would have expected in this short of time on this engineering community, which I'm super jazzed about, because that's where I came from. Those are my people. Like, I was that just a few years ago.
Well, maybe you can go and ghostwriting as well. Books.
It's funny, we're actually working on launching an executive ghostwriting service right now. This is, you kind of mentioned that whole like product market fit thing. I wanted to stay very narrow with our focus in the first couple of years until we really nailed that. And now that that's running pretty well, I've started to explore what are the other services we could do. So ghostwriting is on the list. There's a few other things that make sense to tack on. But we're very like careful about doing too much, because my take is a lot of agencies, service businesses, they tend to just do anything for everyone who will throw them money, and they get very unfocused, and it's very hard to maintain quality and to maintain consistently and to build a team around we do everything for everyone approach. So we're very the other end of the spectrum. We're very methodical, very measured in how we take on things.
Are you afraid of applications or solutions such as Jasper AI or
Sure.
similar?
Yeah.
I mean, in 3 years, 5 years,
I mean, I'm super excited about them. Like
we as well, but my core business is not writing. So
Right. I mean, look, like, I guess I look at this is one business that I'm running today. This is not my life's work in the end of everything I'm ever going to do. So answer A is, if in 10 years, the technology takes over what I do today, fine, I'll move on to something else. Like that's not the end of the world. But answer B is, which I think is the more realistic step, is we look at those technologies all the time, and we look at how could we integrate them in with our writers. Because the reality is, I've tried many of the AI writing tools. They're all based on GPT-3 right now, and that's a great model. But the problem with it is the data they've used is several years out of date now. So when we're talking about cutting edge technical topics, it's not correct anymore. They'll eventually figure out a way to make like the data real time, where it's automatically updated with the latest and greatest, which will help a lot. But it's always, in my perspective, I think it's going to be more like how Excel helps accountants do better work than it is like going to replace the job completely of a good writer. So the writer may still always be involved, as this may be their assistant who helps them write more faster, which would be great because it would cut our costs, we could lower our prices. But I don't think it's going to be like we're going to replace the detail and level of expertise that a 5 or 10 year software engineer has with AI, not right away.
let's go a little bit deeper into the needs. So what needs does your draft, is that the name of the
draft.dev?
Yes, address for software developers?
Our clients want to sell something to a software developer. So they're typically hosting companies or API services or software testing tools, lots of things like that. And so for them, the client, what they need is a way to reach out to and get the attention of software engineers who might buy their tools in a very authentic way that is helpful, genuinely helpful. So one of the things that's happened in marketing is people have kind of gotten away from the whole like hard sell, especially in like a really high impact sale like this, where you're talking to like really smart people who not going to fall for a bunch of BS, or like they don't like cold sales calls. So in other words, what do you do to reach a software engineer? You write really helpful, good content. So I'll just like make a really tangible example. Let's say we're working with a web hosting company that hosts, WordPress sites or whatever. So what they want to do is reach WordPress software engineers, people who are writing code for WordPress. They're doing custom plugins and themes because those people are going to host their stuff on their platform. So they're going to write all the best practices, how to solve this problem with WordPress, how to get faster WordPress sites, things like that. And what helps, or where we come in, is our writers are all like hands-on software engineers who have done this in the real world. They're not just copywriters who, kind of Google searched the first few items on that term and then dropped it in there. They're not AI writers who have no context or understanding of what's really going on. They'll actually write up a demo code sample or code, repository to add to that article. They'll take screenshots the whole way. It's like super in-depth, detailed stuff that you couldn't get from a typical SEO agency or content agency. So that's kind of our unique niche that we fill. And what's cool about it too is, again, because the goal is to build really good educational content, the readers are also getting something out of it. Whether they buy this tool or not, they're still getting a lot of value from that content. And so I love that impact side of it. I worked in ed tech for 10 years before this. So the like education and training and impact side has always been really important to me, even if we're ultimately going to make, these companies more money too, which is great. We want our clients to be successful.
So is there any specific methodology then?
Oh, yeah. So I took a lot of things from working in education for years. Like, one big one, this applies on a lot of levels. One big thing I took away though is this idea of a zone of proximal development, which is really fancy sounding, thing. I think a lot of academics like to throw really fancy words, but basically the idea is anytime someone on your team, let's say I'll take a team member as an example. So if I have a new hire and I'm trying to teach them our whole company, you don't want to start with everything, the whole world of like, here's everything to know, because it's so overwhelming that it's going to get them discouraged. They're not going to feel empowered to learn things. So instead, what you want to start with is the very basics and then slowly work your way out. And there's a magic zone in that list of circles called the zone of proximal development, which means the person is able to do it with just a tiny bit of help or just barely on their own. They don't have to go like deep into the documentation and just guess or just like copy paste examples because they're like they don't really understand it. They actually understand most of it, so they're able to do it with just barely any help. And that's where you want to keep people in. So that applies in a lot of lanes with what we do. So if we're writing an article and it's for super senior, deeply experienced developers, we can skip a lot of the intro stuff that they already know. If we're writing an article for beginners or people that are semi-technical, even let's say it's a brand new grad from a software engineering school, we're going to write it in a totally different way. And so it's really important for us to know the audience of the content we're writing. And then when we think about our writers themselves, like some of them are really, really good and they're just like great writers and great engineers, but the bulk of them, they have fairly good writing skills and decent or really good engineering skills. So we're always trying to see, like, can we push them a little further, or is that beyond their capacity? And we have to constantly do this kind of iteration on that. So it applies in a lot of places. And that's something I've always taken away from education, is thinking about that zone and keeping people in that learning zone where they're really like just a little challenged, but it's not so challenging that they're underwater.
So if I want to be your customer, how does the content creation process work?
We typically, we have a sales call where we talk about what we do, how we do it. We ask them more about what they need, and we'll kind of recommend here's the package we kind of can put together for you. And typically what it ends up looking like is the customer will come to us with either a bunch of ideas for articles that they've already had in place, or they'll ask us to help them generate some ideas, and we'll work with them on that. From there, we'll create detailed outlines and briefs that are about a page each. This helps them see, like, kind of in a very short form, like, what is this article actually going to look like? What will it actually cover? What resources would we need to tell the writer about? Is there any context we're missing? Is there a certain call to action you're trying to get here? Is there a certain level of difficulty or audience you're trying to reach? Anyway, so we'll get all that specified in the brief. And then we go match that up with the best writer who's available and try to do this whole big puzzle piece game of, is the writer available? Do they have the skills? And will this fit in the client's timeline? And so we do that all the time. That's like a constant, we have full-time people doing that essentially all the time. And then as that work gets done, we have several rounds of editing that happens. We do a tech review in-house. We have full-time and part-time engineers, depending on the type of subject, who will review each piece and make sure it's actually technically sound, that the writer really knows this topic well. Then we have a developmental edit, which is more focused on higher level structure and organization. Again, these are not professional writers. They're professional engineers who can kind of write. And so often we're trying to help them get their ideas into a better structure. So we'll give them a lot of feedback and work with them. And then the final step is a copy edit, which is basically just the finer points of grammar, spelling, etc. And then we get that back to a client. They do another round of revisions if they want, and then we're all done. So that's kind of how it looks. It's a really involved process, and it takes a lot of people to build each piece of content, but that's part of what keeps quality high and consistent as we scale this up, because now we're doing, a fairly high number of articles. We have clients doing up to 15 or 20 articles a week, or a month. I'm sorry. So it's, and with 90 clients, like you can kind of extrapolate a little, like most of them are not that high, but it's still like, it's a lot of content. And so it takes a really well-oiled machine to keep that running. If you're interested in this kind of content, like you're a developer tools company, you want to get really good content written, draft.dev is the URL, and we're always happy to chat. There's plenty of information there. Personally, though, if you're an entrepreneur, you're a marketing person, you're interested in learning about this space, and you just want to chat sometime, you can always find me on Twitter at Karl L. Hughes, and Karl's with a K. My email is karl@draft.dev. So you're always welcome to shoot me a message, and we can kind of work it out. I'm always happy to hear more about what other people are working on. So whatever makes sense is great with me. It's just fun to connect with other people on here.
"21st Century Entrepreneurship" with Martin Piskarik.